Yes, and good morning, folks. It's Monday morning, November 11th. This is Veterans Day today, and we are got quite a show packed with action from two veterans, Jim Fetzer and Scott Bennett, I think, the most honored veterans we could possibly get, most informed, that's for sure. And so I'm just so honored to have them here. So let's just get going, Jim. How about this impeachment crap? Show, whatever it is.
You got it. You got it, Don. As Rand Paul has observed, if Trump can't call Hunter Biden or the whistleblower to testify, this whole impeachment proceeding is a sham. On this week's broadcast of Meet the Press on NBC, Senator Rand Paul said if Trump is not allowed to call both Hunter Biden and the whistleblower during public hearings, the impeachment a sham. Chuck Todd said, "Are you an open-minded juror? Let me ask it that way." Rand Paul said, "I'm very open-minded and fair-minded. You'll not find a person more fair than I. I really do believe justice should be colorblind, gender blind, you name it. I think justice should. You know, one of our traditions in finding trust is that the defense should be able to present their witnesses. If you can't call Hunter Biden the whistleblower, that's sort of a sham. It's not really a trial. So I'm fair-minded, but the trial has to be fair." Meanwhile, Lindsey Graham compliments his observation. When we find out the whistleblower is from the deep state, this thing is going to stink to high heaven. "It's impossible to bring this case forward, in my view," said Lindsey Graham, "without us knowing who the whistleblower is and having a chance to cross-examine him about any advice they may have. If they don't call the whistleblower in the House, this thing is dead on arrival in the Senate. If the whistleblower comes from the Brennan world, that would be stunning. I think if the whistleblower had connections to a Democratic candidate, that would be stunning. The only way you can fairly deal with this issue is for us to find out who the whistleblower is. No American can be accused of a crime based on an anonymous allegation. The whistleblower is foundational to what they're doing in the House, and the fact they don't want to call him tells you everything that you need to know about how valid the effort is to impeach the president. What's going to happen? When you find out who the whistleblower is, I'm confident you're going to find out it's somebody from the deep state. You're going to find out they had interaction with a ship. This thing's going to stink to high heaven. The only reason we don't know who the whistleblower is that it hurts their cause. They're not trying to find the truth here. No doubt about it. Meanwhile, Nikki Haley has a new book reporting that Kelly and Tillerson tried to run the country behind Trump's back, which would be good reason for getting rid of them. Haley's claims made in a new book and reported by the Washington Post comes as former White House aides have told the White House impeachment inquiry they were alarmed that Trump was making his own policy on Ukraine, which is completely absurd since the Constitution invested in the president the right to fashion U.S. foreign policy as the only authority designated by the Constitution. In Haley's book, with all due respect, she reports former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, former White House Chief of Staff John Kelly sought to recruit her to work around and subvert Trump, but she refused. Good for her. Kelly and Tillerson confided in me that when they resisted the president, they weren't being insubordinate. They were trying to save the country in violation of the Constitution. It was their decisions, not the president's, that were in the best interests of America. They said the president didn't know what he was doing. Kelly and Tillerson's views mirror those made by some of the witnesses Democrats called in private before the House Intel Committee. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, for example, admitted he did not know if anything Trump said to the president of Ukraine in their now infamous phone call was illegal, but he was concerned that Trump's views went outside the interagency consensus and reflected an unproductive narrative. That is, they had a disagreement on policy, which is obviously not a basis for impeachment. Meanwhile, Alan Dershowitz, Dems try to create crimes out of nothing. There is no crime to be found amid the House Democrats' latest impeachment inquiry, which had frightened all Americans, said legal expert, I'd even say wizard, Alan Dershowitz. Whether you're from New York or the middle of the country, you should be frightened by efforts to try to create crimes out of nothing. He told the Cats Roundtable, well, I spent the afternoon yesterday searching the federal criminal statutes from beginning to end. I couldn't find the crime. Dershowitz has long argued the justice system should be used to investigate the commission of crimes, not actively seek investigation of Americans to find if a crime might have been committed. First, they made up collusion. Dershowitz, a self-proclaimed Democrat himself, told a host of about impeachment-seeking Democrats, I searched the statute books. There's no crime of collusion with a foreign country. After that, they said obstruction of Congress. Americans should drop their animus of President Trump, realize the danger is what's transpiring from the always evolving effort to get him out of office. In a desperate effort to try to find crimes committed by President Trump, they're just making it up, Dershowitz reported, and that means we are all in danger. Scott, your thoughts?
I think the American people are at a point, Jim, where if Trump lost or was pushed out or they stole the election, none of his people, none of the Republicans would accept the president, whoever it is. This has crossed a threshold. This has crossed a line. Americans, all the reasonable ones at least, recognize this for what it is. Dershowitz, even a Democrat, so many others have recognized the utter absurdity and the falsity behind all of the accusations and the allegations and the flimsy legalese, floundering that the Democrats have put forth, even forth the lies that Adam Schiff has said, reading on the floor a summary of what he said, Trump said, which was totally perverted to match Adam Schiff's perversion himself. So I think this is crossed a line with Americans. And I know I, for one, would never accept anyone other than Donald Trump as president because we recognize the skullduggery and the corruption of the Democrats. It has no bounds. It has no restraint. There is nothing off the table for them to steal an election, to undermine the Constitution, to enslave the American people to the moral will of their agenda, whatever it is. They are the high priests of transhumanist morality. And if you don't subscribe to that, if you don't submit to that, if you are not enslaved to that and worship that, then you are an enemy to be cast onto their bonfire. That's the simple Democrat logic. And that means civil war. We've said it for a long time. So I think this is not going to happen. I think Trump will win. I think all of the Democrats are going to have this blow up in their face. I think with all of the material that we know, and let me once again say, I know for a fact, because I was there, about Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Covington and Burling and Loretta Lynch and Barack Obama and Robert Wolf, chairman of the Americas of Union Bank of Switzerland, and all of the pay-to-play operations from Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia was my country when I was at U.S. Central Command. I know all of the terrorist financing shenanigans that went on with the Hillary Clinton Foundation, State Department, Booz Allen Hamilton, and all of that is sufficient to prosecute and imprison Hillary Clinton, Eric Holder, Lanny Brewer, and all these people. That is just one of the items, of course, that is coming out, and they're all interconnected. So that's what the Democrats are running from desperately, trying to use this obstruction and Ukraine, and before that it was Russia. But we're seeing, as this sort of breaks to the surface, as this comes into the sunlight, Jim, it instantly just evaporates. It instantly just burns up because there's nothing there. Jim, go ahead.
Oh, I think you got it right, Scott. I mean, they're following Al Green's observation that if we don't impeach this guy, he will get reelected. And they're petrified at the prospect of democracy actually working in the United States and the people making a difference, rather than the establishment dictating who is going to be the president of the United States. It's absolutely disgraceful, shameless.
So I just want to, go ahead.
Meanwhile, the whistleblower's attorney said back in 2017 the coup has started. This is really further confirmation of the corruption involved here. Mark Zaid, one of the attorneys representing the intel community whistleblower, tweeted conspicuously in January of 2017 that the coup had started. Impeachment will follow ultimately. Eric Carmella's attorney, and this is the guy who's been identified as a whistleblower, and just as Lindsey Graham said, this guy is a creature of the deep state. a few people have started looking at the connection between Mark Zaid, the attorney for the CIA whistleblower Eric Carmella. What's going to start to emerge is evidence of what the outline, this journal outlined yesterday. The current impeachment process is part of a coup continuum. Everything around the whistleblower is part of a long ago planned and pre-constructed operation. Two strong examples are very poignant. Mark Zaid tweeting, "It's very scary. We will get rid of him. And this country is strong enough to survive even him and his supporters. We have to," in July of 2017. This tweet by the whistleblower's attorney is evidence of what we were sharing yesterday, a point that almost everyone is missing. What's happening now with Adam Schiff and his lawfare contracted legal aid, Daniel Goldman, was designed last year. The current House committee legislative impeachment process, and every aspect within it is the execution of a plan, just like the DOJ FBI plan before in 2016, 17, and 18. Meanwhile, Trump reads tweets posted by the whistleblower's lawyer. A lawyer who was working with a supposed whistleblower in the effort to impeach Trump forgot to scrub his social media history. Trump is not pulling his punches with these swamp critters, not at all. And now it's become known he had specific plans to prevent Trump from completing his first term as president right from the beginning. It adds weight to Trump's allegations that these charges against him were fabricated as part of a deliberate conspiracy to remove him. This is a real conspiracy, no theory to it. It sure would explain all those suspicious connections between the whistleblower and shifty staffers. Trips his staffers took to Ukraine before anyone had seen the official complaint. A trip funded by people with a connection to Burisma. And you can throw in the tweet Schiff wrote about this very topic before the complaint went public for good measure, would you believe? Not only is Joe Biden's son on the Burisma board of directors, Nancy Pelosi's son is on the Burisma board of directors, Mitt Romney's son is on the Burisma board of directors, and John Kerry's son is on the Burisma board of directors. They're trying to protect themselves from exposure of their profound corruption. Meanwhile, some Republicans have broken with Trump and Rand Paul on unmasking the whistleblower, which is unfortunate. They obviously haven't thought it through. Standing with President Trump, Senator Rand Paul called for the media to unmask the Ukraine whistleblower and was cheered by rally goers in Kentucky. Do your job and print his name, Paul said as the president clapped and looked on approvingly. Then he went a step further, threatening to reveal the name himself, but many of Paul's colleagues oppose the idea of exposing the identity of the person. Senior Senate Republicans are worried about the president. But they've obviously not thought it through. This whole thing is rigged. They even revised the whistleblower form, so you didn't have to have firsthand knowledge. You got to report any rumors, speculation, conjecture, or hearsay. This is disgraceful. These senators aren't taking the matter more seriously. We should follow the law, and I believe the law protects whistleblowers, said Senator Lamar Alexander. Well, those are bona fide whistleblowers. This guy's a fraud. The whistleblower statute is there for a reason. I think we need to respect the law where whistleblowers are concerned. Rob Portman said officials ought to respect the whistleblower law. So did Rick Scott. Several senators cited the work of Chuck Grassley, the most senior Senate Republican, who has made whistleblower protection a signature issue, but that's for real whistleblowers. Meanwhile, Russia collusion clues all point back to John Brennan. How crazy has the last year been? You probably have to pause for a minute to remember who John Brennan is. There have been many false scandals this year. It's hard to remember important things that might date back as far as 2017 or actually before that. For those who don't keep a close eye on politics, here's your reminder. Brennan was director of the CIA from 2013 to 2017 when President Trump took office. Brennan lost that job pretty quickly. Now look at those dates again. You know, Brennan was running the CIA in 2016. You're going to suspect that he at least knew about the illegal spying on the Trump campaign. As you're as cynical as the rest of us, you'll assume he was a key figure in making that spying a reality, which undoubtedly he was. Meanwhile, Joe DeVennet and Victoria Tensing have appeared on Fox News to discuss issues surrounding the ongoing investigations by Inspector General Horowitz and U.S. Attorney Durham. Mr. DeGeneva and Ms. Tensing bring the TikTok hammer to the audience. According to Ms. Tensing, the upcoming IG report is going to be very bad for people in the Obama administration. Tensing went on to say, it's going to be worse than you can imagine. Mr. DeGeneva went on to say it's going to be devastating. It's going to ruin careers. Mr. DeGeneva has a great deal of confidence in AG, Barr, Horowitz, and Durham, and he also has inside information. Scott, your thoughts?
Well, Jim, let me just cite on the Shell Game report that we submitted in 2012, about the middle of the book, in the actual report that went out September 25th, 2012. This was Terrorist Threat Finance Dimensions of Union Bank of Switzerland Whistleblower Case and Obama Administration by Second Lieutenant Scott Bennett, 11th Psychological Operations Battalion. A whistleblowing report to the United States Congress and the Department of Defense Inspector General. That's the title of this frickin' report that went out to these bastards in uniform and these monkey dicks in Congress. And let me just cite this because these bastards knew about this in 2012. It's right here in typewriter prison format. I typed it on IBM prison typewriters and had guys smuggling it out under their shirts to the airport down the street.
You made good use of your time, my friend. You made good use of your time. Maybe the best ever by any inmate in a federal penitentiary.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I had the whistleblower Birkenfeld, and here's who I named, Jim. Other government political persons implicated or knowledgeable about key terrorist financing dimensions and crossover with the UBS case. John O. Brennan, counterterrorism advisor to Obama and candidate for CIA director until withdrawn. This is before he was CIA director. We reported Brennan as one of the people that was implicated in the Obama terrorist financing, Shell Game, and all this stuff. John O. Brennan. So every SOB got a copy of this, including people at the White House, sees in black and white. There are other people mentioned, of course. Michael Hayden is right here. John Rizzo, Dennis Blair, Cameron Hunter, General James Jones, Thomas Dunillon, National Security Agency, Harold Coe, Keith Alexander, Commander of NSA, General Caldwell, Matthew Olson, Admiral Mullen, all sorts of people. I mean, I won't belabor it. In addition to others, and all of this went to members of Congress too. And I've got a whole list of everybody that went to. So the whole thing started in 2012. The whole thing started before that, actually, with this massive pay-to-play corruption that the Democrats under Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were using to treat the American government as a casino, as a Las Vegas casino. And the Democrats always do that. They leverage human suffering. They create human suffering with racism. They create class warfare with blacks against whites, gays against heterosexuals, women against men. And Democrats position themselves as the nexus of that conflict in order to parasitically exist off of the desperation and the antagonisms of people. And this was a prime example of this, and we reported it. And I reported this to Romney and Reince Priebus, again, in September of 2012, before Romney went up and ran. And Reince Priebus did nothing. The Republican National Committee did nothing. So they all need to hang too. All of this is part of I think a whole domino effect. It didn't come out until RT brought it out. I was on Russia Today with Peter Lavelle. I've been on Press TV. I've talked ad nauseum about this. But it's all coming out now. And people like Joseph Deneneva and his wife, they got a copy of this too. I briefed Sidney Powell about this. That's why Michael Flynn is going to go free very soon. Covington and Burling is all over Michael Flynn. This is almost this is almost a Herman Wouk book. Remember The Winds of War, Jim? You're one of the few men with the intellect and the experience to remember Herman Wouk, The Winds of War, that great author. Also, the guy who did American Caesar, the MacArthur biographies. This is a massive, massive tome. This is War and Peace. This is Tolstoy stuff. This is so huge because it's been an ongoing narrative that they've been shifting and developing in a kaleidoscopic way. But the light is beginning to dim. The batteries are beginning to dim in their kaleidoscopic, little toy. And the American people are starting going, wait a minute. You went from Russia, you went from collusion, now you've gone to Ukraine, and now you've gone to all of these things, and now it's all falling apart. Now you have this whistleblower guy who's not a whistleblower, he's a leaker. And every member of Congress can say his name on the floor. That's the protection Congress has. So you're right. The fact that none of these limp dicks don't get up there and say, Anthony Eric Ciaramella is the man who has betrayed his country, betrayed his president, betrayed his office. He was employed. He was brought back in by H.R. McMaster. So H.R. McMaster, another traitor to Trump, like Tillerson and like Kelly. Trump is surrounded by traitors. And I've said this before. He needs to bring in a Praetorian Guard of special operation military people who know what the commander-in-chief's all about, have taken the oath seriously to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. He needs to bring in military people in plain clothes positions. We did this at the State Department. You bring active duty military officers in, you put them in plain clothes, and they are assigned by the president, the commander in chief, to ferret out counter-espionage, to ferret out leakers, to ferret out traitors. This person is a traitor to his country. He allegedly divulged information between our president and a Ukrainian president, again, for this massive cover-up. Ciaramella is connected to Brennan. Sidney Powell just sent out a tweet saying Ciaramella is an acolyte of Brennan. So this is Schiff. This is the Democrats desperately floundering to survive. But Trump is in the driver's seat. You know what he should do, Jim? He should go on his rallies and read to the American people exactly what you said and say, ladies and gentlemen, I want to read you something. I want to read you this right here. Let me tell you something. You know who's on the board of that company? Paul Pelosi Jr., Hunter Biden. Oh, we got John Kerry's son on here. Look, it's right here, ladies and gentlemen, because holding up a piece of paper is a powerful visual effect. It's not just his words. He's got something here for America to go, want a copy of this? Go to the White House. I'm putting it up on the White House.
Once the American people absorb the point that the members, the sons of these prominent political figures are all trying to cover their ass, it's going to blow the whole thing apart, Scott. You've done this brilliant work, making such good use of your time incarcerated unjustly. It may be the most important period of your entire life that you produce this work that has such devastating consequences and ramifications. And I share your disgust with these traitors to the United States and these phony politicians who are abusing the American people to protect themselves and their own wealth, their ill-gotten gain. John, I know you want to endorse what Scott and I are saying here.
Oh, this is a time, folks. This is critical here on Veterans Day of all days. These veterans have been through the experience. Listen to Scott and Jim, and as far as this impeachment thing is going, I'd say it's sort of like a young man who's out hunting and somebody else was coming.
Don, we lost you. Might want to repeat. Do we have you, Don? Meanwhile, the Democrats release and the media repeat Cliff's notes of the impeachment transcripts. The Democrats on the House have been releasing highly edited, abbreviated versions of the transcripts of the depositions in order to make the points they want to make. Embarrassingly bad. The Cliff Note versions download more quickly than the full transcripts, which are large and unwieldy and are often unavailable as the House committee website appears overloaded. The Democrats' abridged version are shorter or arranged like legal briefs. Quotes are not provided in the order they're given, but the order the Democrats feel best helps them make the case for impeachment. Each quote is preceded by a boldface section that states a Democrat's own conclusion before the text itself appears. In other words, They're telling you what they want you to believe, regardless of the evidence. For example, the transcript of the deposition of diplomat William Taylor, whom the Democrats apparently consider their strongest witness, is hundreds of pages long, but the Cliff Note version is only 13. It begins with a high-loaded quote on the cover page, Taylor's statement that he had a clear understanding that security assistance money would not come until the president of Ukraine committed to pursue the investigation. That claim of clear understanding was widely circulated, cited in the media as evidence it was a quid pro quo in President Trump's request Ukraine investigate allegations against Joe Biden and his son Hunter. But the transcript omitted the key exchange between Taylor and Representative Lee Zeldin, in which Taylor admitted he hadn't even talked to Trump about it. His only source of information was the New York Times. Scott, this is disgusting beyond words. Zeldin, what was the goal of requesting investigation into the 2016 election and Burisma? Taylor, as I understand it from one of maybe the article in the New York Times about Rudy Giuliani's interest in Burisma, in that article he describes, and I think he quotes Giuliani at length, indicates Giuliani was interested in getting information on Vice President Biden that would be useful to Mr. Giuliani's client. I think that's what he says. He says he got one client and it's useful to the client. Zeldin, that it's your interest that Mr. Giuliani's goal would be the president's goal? Taylor, yes. And your source is the New York Times? Taylor, yes. So do you have any other source that the president's goal in making this request was anything other than the New York Times? Taylor, I have not talked to the president. I have no other information from what the president was thinking. The most important line, I have not talked to the president, does not appear in the Democrats' short version. Moreover, the Cliff Note version leaves out Taylor's admission under questioning from John Ratcliffe that nobody in the Ukrainian government was aware of any suspension of aid, making a quid pro quo impossible. It's also omits Taylor's acknowledgement that Trump's policy on Ukraine was an improvement on that of President Obama, who denied Ukraine lethal military aid, including Javelin anti-tank missiles, for use against Russia. That explains why the mainstream media and conservative media are reporting such different conclusions about Taylor's deposition. The mainstream media rushed to press with the Democrats' Cliff Notes, which left out information that contradicted the Democrats' assertion. The conservative media tended to read the document as well in its totality, which meant they often responded more slowly to the release of the transcript, but reported it more accurately. Meanwhile, most Americans have little to no trust in impeachment process, would rather let voters decide in 2020. Most Americans have little to no trust in the impeachment inquiry and think the best way to remove him from office would be to let the voters decide at the ballot box in November, according to a Monmouth University poll. According to the survey, 73% of those polled have little to no trust in how the House impeachment inquiry has been conducted to date, while 59% say it would make more sense to wait until next year's election. The same poll found just 44% of Americans think Trump should be impeached and removed from office. That's the hardcore Democrat base. Even many who would like to impeach Trump seem to feel beating him at the polls in 2020 is actually a better strategy for ousting him from office, said Patrick Murray, director of the independent Monmouth University Polling Institute. What's more, 71% think it's unlikely the Senate would vote to remove Trump, which, as Nancy Pelosi warned, would simply empower Republicans after Democrats can't tank Trump for asking Ukraine to investigate whether former VP Joe Biden and his son Hunter engage in quid pro quo personally to enrich themselves, which we know for a fact based upon the video of Trump boasting about it. That said, just over half of Americans think it's a good idea for the House to conduct these inquiries, even if many people have little or no trust in it. Those who approve the job Trump is doing rose to 42% from 41 in September, from 51 disapprove, down from 53. Those who approve, 63% can't think of anything he could do that would cause them to stop supporting him. So here we have the situation, Biden boasting on tape, I'm going to withhold $1 billion in aid for Ukraine unless you fire the prosecutor investigating my son within the 6 hours before I take my flight out, or you don't get the money. Trump says, Ukraine, you might want to look into that. Schiff says, quid pro quo. This political cartoon captures the essence of the case. It's a complete obscenity and a disgrace that the Democrats are pursuing this totally unwarranted impeachment effort. Scott.
Well, again, the American president has the American people on his side morally regards to this. There's nothing that they hate more than government politicians in general. I mean, they hate politicians because of their speaking out of both sides of their mouths, their corruption. It's part of the American language now that all politicians, sadly, are not leaders, are not statesmen. They're corrupt personalities, and this entire situation confirms that. This entire situation where Biden can go into Ukraine, first of all, that you could do a coup d'etat in Ukraine with Obama and John Kerry and Hillary Clinton and Victoria Nuland and all of these other players going into Ukraine, getting rid of Yanukovych and putting up Poroshenko, and then engaging and trying to peel away Ukraine from Russia, to make Ukraine a proxy against in a war with Russia. That's how all of this started. And now Trump has exposed that, and he's made a call to the president and essentially said there's corruption, there's all sorts of things that have gone on. We'd like to know about it. Please investigate it. And he's within his rights to do that. And every American would want to do that. Every American would want to know, your sons are on the board of energy companies. You've got all this money on a monthly basis just because of Joe Biden. Joe Biden actually stopped U.S. aid from going to Ukraine because of this corruption and this exposure. So the Democrats have no moral or ethical position whatsoever. All they're doing is this hysterical lie upon lie upon lie of distractions and delusions to halfwits. And I think it's running its course. It's disintegrating. It's losing all momentum. But these people need to be attacked. They need to be attacked and exposed for what they are. Adam Schiff needs to be exposed for his political connections to the homosexual abusive guy in Southern California that was caught feeding drugs to poor black men or homeless men. I can't remember all the details, but he was recently arrested and indicted for that. He was a big Democrat fundraiser, and he had been exposed for the death of some of these poor black, sort of homeless guys for filling them up with meth or whatever it was. This was a major Democrat donor to Adam Schiff and to others. So those sort of things need to be exposed in political campaign ads and billboards. The debauchery and the corruption in these men's souls needs to be fully exposed, because that's how the American public can learn quickly about these things. I think it's all going to blow back, but I think it's something that Trump really, really needs to get serious about and start reading from paper again, saying, here's what we have. We have all these names right here, and if you want a copy of it, I'm putting it on the White House. And the more he says that, the more he actually says, I have lists and we've got exposures of treason, and we're investigating with John Durham and Bill Barr into criminal investigations now. We all know this will lead to criminal indictments, and that's what needs to happen in the spring of 2020, so that people see it before summer, before they break away for summer. They need to see all of these indictments for people for criminal acts and treason against the United States of America. That's how serious, not just little things like making false statements. No, throw the whole bag of treason against John Brennan, treason against these people. And one of the other persons is Michael Isikoff. Michael Isikoff needs to be exposed. He was the one who met me with Tom Hamburger of the Washington Post. Michael Isikoff was NBC News. That all needs to be put forth, because Michael Isikoff is up to his neck in the Ukraine story. Jim?
Yes, I'm working with Don. We lost him temporarily. We'll bring him back at the break and get things back on track. Meanwhile, Scott, I couldn't agree more with your key points. Meanwhile, far-left CNN is losing viewers during the impeachment crusade. This is by John Nolte, who's a very smart guy. CNN's partisan crusade to impeach Trump appears to be costing the far-left outlet viewers compared to October of last year. MSNBC and Fox News have remained fairly steady in their ratings, which shows Americans are not that into this whole impeachment hoax. The media's fanatical crusade to remove Trump from office is, of course, mostly based on ideological ground. The corporate media are run by far-left activists who hate Trump, have still not come to terms with his 2016 victory, and were certain their Russia collusion hoax would be the end of him. But another reason media are so closely colluding with Democrats to overturn the 2060 election is ratings. In the wake of special counsel Robert Mueller debunking their 3-year Russia collusion hoax, CNN and MSNBC are suffering through humiliating ratings and are desperate for anything to boost their viewership numbers. And for a bit, this ridiculous impeachment effort did work as a short-term sugar high. But now that it's become obvious Democrats don't have the goods to impeach, not only have CNN and MSNBC's ratings settled back down, in some areas their ratings are lower than they were last year when they were not screaming about impeachment. To ensure this isn't cherry picking on my part, I'm comparing last week's cable news rating to the entire month of October 2018, just in case there was a hurricane or mass shooting during that same week last October. October 2018, total primetime viewers. Fox, nearly 3 million. MSNBC, more than 1.5. CNN, less than 1 million. Week of October 28th, total primetime viewers. Fox, 2.7. MSNBC, 1.8. CNN, below 900,000, about 884. October 2018 in the date. Fox, 1.7. MSNBC, 909,000. CNN, 690,000 the week of October. Fox, over 1.5 million. MSNBC, just over 1 million. CNN, 665,000. So as you can see, MSNBC's primetime and total day viewership are a little higher, but negligible. CNN's primetime viewership and total day is actually lower, while Fox remains pretty much the same. How is that possible? The same week the House voted to formalize impeachment hearings? Well, this confirms what I've suspected. Since my evidence was anecdotal, I didn't report it. Over the years, I've stayed in regular touch with my own little focus group, a half dozen people who don't know they're part of my focus group, but are people I qualify as swing voters. Most reluctantly voted for Trump in 2016. A couple did not, but considered it. What I find most informative is how they run hot and cold on Trump. Sometimes they like him, other times they can't stand all the unnecessary drama he creates. For example, they all hated him telling the squad to go back to their own countries, but they love the contempt he heaps on the media. 4 of them have said they might support Joe Biden if he wins the nomination. The other 2 say they definitely will. None of them, not a single one, however, is talking about impeachment. In fact, no one, whether I know it or not, in any restaurant, any checkout line, any waiting room, any place, anywhere I have heard or overheard discuss impeachment. It's just not on the minds of everyday Americans. And CNN is the only one hurting. The failing New York Times stock plunges after the company reports continuing declines in advertising. Stock of the company plunged as much as 7% Wednesday, finishing the session down about 4% on news that its revenue from advertising continues to decline. The company reported this week that ad revenue for its print division is not down 9.7% year over year and down 17.2% for its digital version. Print advertising fell 7.9%. Digital advertising fell 5.4%. Despite this, the company also reported a jump in subscribers to 4 million digital only and 4.9 million total subscribers. We have other reports, however, that their subscriptions have been falling. On its earnings call, the company pivoted from advertising to its new partnership with Facebook News. CEO Mark Thompson commented, more important than the immediate financial benefits of the agreement is its strategic significance. Remember, Facebook, like the other social media giants, is adamantly opposed to Trump and wants to impeach him. So the Times is simply showing its true colors, that it's another impeachment platform. Joining with Facebook consolidates it. Facebook News launched in October, but has generated headlines of its own for its plan to license content from trusted news outlets for millions of dollars. Embarrassingly bad. Scott, I'm sorry. The media continues to fail the American people.
Well, we've seen this coming, and it's very interesting because we've come from a time when you didn't have the internet, you didn't have YouTube, you didn't have Facebook or Twitter, and really I don't pay much attention to Twitter or Facebook. Most all the jibber jabber and nonsense, can be very, very counterproductive. But those are good platforms to post articles and to network and to synergize, and I think that's what shows such as Dawn's is a powerful example of, because he is producing a show that allows our voices and our analysis to be combined, and it's creating from the substance of the earth gunpowder that couldn't be created otherwise, and it's a very valuable informational explosive to people to free them from the cocoon of idiocy and submission and effeminacy and slavish mentality that has been cultivated in the United States for the past 50 years. So the internet is breaking people out. It's awakening, and it's confirming alpha male impulses in many people. And that scares and terrorizes the beta males and the effeminates like Adam Schiff and the horrific fascist Nazis like Hillary Clinton. And the mainstream media is always full of guilt. So, and you see that trickling down into the educational institutions, this whole trying to label white people as terrorists and all this stuff. We really are seeing a civil war, and the internet is part of the information of that. The mainstream media is dying. Even Fox News has hit its zenith, and Tucker Carlson, for as good he is, and even Hannity at times can be good. They do hit a few bells. They aren't exposing the whole truth. They aren't talking like we're talking, and we've exposed things every time that have come true. There's nothing that we've ever said that is not true, that we do not say as officers of the United States military formally who've sworn an oath, that take that seriously, that speak everything into the protection of our constitutional republic and the Constitution. So we're setting a stage, we're setting a trailblazer, if you will. We're sort of the Rangers, the Pathfinders, and I think we're seeing a massive swath in America beginning to follow in that direction that is going to really lead, if the Democrats and the George Soros types try and pull a fast one and steal the election and say, now we can all get along, let's all bury the hatchet and vote for whoever, or accept the Democrat president. No, that's not going to happen. We're in civil war, and we're not going to stop. If this is the new normal, then so be it, because there's no one more prepared to fight for freedom than conservative former military. And you have the biggest, like you said many times, Jim, the biggest armed army in the civilian population on planet Earth. So we don't back down. We never will. And in a sense, we all live in our communities, in our states, and our regions. We do not live in the continental United States, although we do symbolically. But all of our identity and our traditions and our family and our bloodlines and everything that defines us is within a 100-mile radius. So I think we're reaching a time of transformation in this country, and I think it's going to be very exciting. We saw this with Ellen Zhao. They've stolen the election from her, but we're filing actions in court, and we're not accepting it because the Chinese Communist Party and the Democrats were pulling down her billboards. So we have to fight on as hard as we can every time we see this.
Scott, well said. From veterans on Veterans Day, this is a message that needs to get across to the American people. McConnell impeachment trial would not lead to removal. Democrats jazzed up about EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland modifying his testimony before the House Intel Committee. Headlines all over the place have shouted to the public, Sondland confirmed quid pro quo, putting Donald Trump's presidency in jeopardy. He's trapped. He's got nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It's all over but the shouting. Put a fork in him. We haven't heard the Democrats and the media so certain of Trump's impending downfall since, gosh, it's been at least a month. Throwing cold water on their excitement, however, was Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who assured reporters that nothing had changed as far as Republicans in the Senate are concerned. Asked what would happen if the Senate were to hold Trump's impeachment trial today, the Kentucky senator was implacable. I will say I'm pretty sure how it's likely to end, McConnell said. If it were today, I don't think there's any question it would not lead to a removal. So the question is, how long does the Senate want to take? How long do the presidential candidates want to be here on the floor of the Senate instead of in Iowa and New Hampshire? In other words, McConnell is saying that if and when the House sends their party line impeachment articles to the Senate, he's going to put the trial on fast track, preside over the inevitable acquittal within a week's time, and then everyone will get to back out on the campaign trail. Put another way, he's saying, let's get this over with, Pelosi. There's no conceivable fantasy world in which your silly push to undo 2016 is going to get past me. Indeed, far from convincing Senate Republicans to change their minds on impeachment, the House Democrats may have actually warmed them up for a political firefight on Capitol Hill. A Washington Post report, among a group of Trump's allies inside and outside Congress, there is intense and growing interest in countering the House Democrats' impeachment inquiry with their own scrutiny of Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings in Ukraine and China, because his father was vice president at the time. These allies believe it could be a way of explaining why Trump pressed Ukraine's President Zelensky in the July 25th phone call to look into the Bidens who denied any wrongdoing. This would be epic. Go ahead, pass your impeachment, Nancy, and when it comes over to our side, we'll turn it into the Joe Biden show and crush your only viable 2020 contender for all the country to watch. Trump has finally taught these Republicans how to fight back against Democrat smear tactics, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. By the end of this circus, Nancy Pelosi is going to be sorry she ever mentioned the word Ukraine to the American people. Meanwhile, a new poll of the 2020 swing states has Democrats sounding the alarm. The New York Times and Siena College just released a new poll of the states that will likely decide the 2020 presidential election, and the numbers have Democrats sounding the alarm. While the poll shows Trump trailing barely behind Biden in a couple of points in the battleground states, he's way ahead of Elizabeth Warren and in a virtual tie with Bernie Sanders. The poll has some Democrat and never Trump pundits practically begging voters to choose Biden as a nominee. They know that a progressive candidate like Sanders or Warren could spell electoral doom next November. Despite low national approval ratings and the specter of impeachment, President Trump remains highly competitive in the battleground states likeliest to decide his reelection, according to a set of new surveys from the New York Times, Upshot, and Siena College, the Times reported, the dismay practically leaking from the newsprint. The poll confirms what we thought for a long time. If Democrats have the slightest prayer of winning the election, it'll be Biden or bust. America, despite what you may believe after spending an inordinate amount of time reading Twitter and perusing Rabbit, is not anywhere close to being ready for a socialist president. And while Elizabeth Warren describes herself as a capitalist or Medicare for all plan is the most expansive and expensive socialist program ever introduced by a major presidential candidate, she would be crushed. Sanders would be crushed. It's hard to imagine any of the other losers on the state actually winning the nomination. Here, going more deeply into it, John Nolte, 2020 swing state polls show why the media want Trump impeached. Among likely voters, Trump is losing by only 2 points to quid pro Joe Biden in Florida, Arizona, and Wisconsin. In Pennsylvania and Michigan, slow Joe is only up by a single point. Trump leads in North Carolina by 2. Bernie Sanders only beats Trump in one of those states, Michigan, by 3 points. They are tied in Wisconsin. Trump beats Bernie by 4 in Arizona and North Carolina, by 1 in Pennsylvania, and 2 in Florida. As far as the Democrat runner Elizabeth Warren, Trump leads from 2 to 4 points in all those states, except Arizona, where they're tied. If that's not scary enough for the media, the latest polling has Trump winning Nevada, a state he lost in 2016. In other words, if Bernie or the fake Indian, currently the favorite, win the nomination. At least according to these polls, Trump wins the Electoral College in a second term. As far as Biden, the great slight hope, who is considered Trump's most formidable opponent, well, here's why the fake media are terrified and pushing for Trump's impeachment and removal. Like the rest of us, the media knows these four things for certain. One, polling has historically underestimated Trump's strength by about 5 points. Two, Trump is doing remarkably well in the middle of impeachment hearings that will almost certainly end with his acquittal and vindication. If not in the House, then in the Senate. Three, while Biden might have the best shot at stopping Trump, everyone knows that it's only on paper. Biden is a terrible campaigner. The fact that his son looted at least 3 foreign countries we know of is a huge liability Trump will exploit to the hilt. And Joe is old, and I don't mean in years, but physically and mentally. And he was not all that together as a younger man. If Biden wins the nomination, Trump will work that frail old man into the ground during the general election. Trump deliberately and effectively exhausted Hillary Clinton, and he plans to do it again. Four, most importantly, Trump is not out campaigning right now, not out on the trail, talking about his record, his legitimate accomplishments. He's not out contrasting himself with his far left opponent and doing what he does best, selling himself, his vision, his ideas, his common sense, his fearlessness, his love for America, and his ridiculously appealing battle cry of one man versus the swamp that gave you endless wars, income stagnation, and open borders. The media are especially freaked out because they know history is on Trump's side. Meanwhile, despite constant liberal media attacks, Trump's approval rating has hit 50%, 3 points higher than Obama at the same point in his presidency. Despite the constant drubbing and smears by the liberal media, President Trump's approval rating hit 50% today, November 7th. President Obama's approval rating at the same time was 47%, 3 points behind Trump. Barack Obama, by contrast, had a cakewalk with the media. In August, pollster John McLaughlin reported his polling shows Americans want Trump reelected by a 51 to 38% margin. Scott, a few comments here before we take our break.
Well, I think the animus that is brewing up from these discontented people, as was said in the Flying Dutchman, fury and discontent assuages itself with the outward destruction of other countries and international arenas. And I think it's the internal disruptions and the internal antagonisms and the internal domestic lobotomization that we've done to ourselves from 1960 onward, really probably starting with the death of Kennedy, and then in the 1970s, we've shifted to a big state, government military industrial complex that translated through the 80s with hostility. And then at the termination of the Soviet Union, we really became the wolf man. We really, we were kept at bay, right? The clouds of transforming us into the monstrosity that we currently are. The clouds were the Soviet Union and the balance of power that kept the moon of opportunity, if you will, concealed. But with the disintegration of the Soviet Union, the full transformation of America into this devouring monster, all the while camouflaging our will and intentions to the American people as this is a requirement to fight them over there before they come here, to be the beacon of liberty and democracy and blah, 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 blah. And what the opposite is true. This has been a license to destroy. And I think that's caused a great delusion and violence in the soul of America. And Donald Trump was elected to take that away. Let's always return to that. I mean, Donald Trump was not elected to become a better Rex Tillerson or to be a better James Mattis and continue the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria and Libya. He wasn't elected to continue these wars. He was elected to end them, to pull American kids out so they don't die in chopper accidents, so they don't die of being run over by tanks because they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Nobody wants their kid over there, and no kid in uniform wants to be there. And all of this is illegal. All of this is a war crime, and it's been talked about. Ashton Ratanzi just did a great interview with President Bashar Assad, and it's stunning and staggering the amount of propaganda and misinformation that the West and the British have fed its own populations. But when you see the real truth and triangulate it, you see we're completely on the wrong side of history. We're on the side of the rapists and the pillagers and the destroyers of this whole region. And God is not mocked, and vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I shall repay. I think this country is entering a time of darkness and shadows. If we don't repent, we will be paid back for it. That's why I'm very alarmed when Trump does things like saying we're going to keep the oil. That is precisely the wrong thing to be doing, and he may be just throwing it out there to feed the neocon Lindsey Grahams so that they help him win the re-election. But under no circumstances should Trump ever think he will continue in office if he allows the continuation of this endless war policy. The only thing that'll save him is if he completely drains the swamp of the deep state and reverses the course of the deep state and prosecutes the traitors who initiated this direction of the deep state, going back to Cheney and Bush and Rumsfeld and Myers, starting in 9/11 and going forward. This is a long Nuremberg hearing that needs to start. Jim?
I think you got it exactly right, Scott.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, yes.
Well, I just want to say that, yes, this is Veterans Day, and I will ask all the veterans out there who served the country so well and so meaningfully, hey, was it really worth it? I mean, where's our values? I mean, it looks like Scott says, we're on the wrong side of history, man, and it's just terrible, and that's why I think we're having suicides and other problems there. So it's just really a shame. The last 19 years. Oh wow. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Scott, but Don, why don't we take us out and then we'll come back and get you back in the saddle here, my friend.
Okay, I guess what time is it anyway?
Sign. You got your sign.
We're probably close enough. So let's see. This is there we go. This is Truth versus News, and it's on Veterans Day, of course. November the 11th, with two of the most outstanding vets you could ever imagine, and we're fighting the truth versus official facts. And essentially, it's really something else that the government has said this is the way it is, and for anybody to contest their media, their bias, is a conspiracy theorist. But no, we're analysts, so we're investigating the laws, the situation, and coming up with the truth here. So that's what we're doing, and we don't have any more fake news. So essentially, we're doing good. So I guess we'll go out. You have to take it out. I'm not recording anymore. So adios whenever you're ready.